Welcome back to the channel. Today's video, I'm going to explain why everybody is wrong about population collapse, including the likes of Elon Musk, Jordan Peterson, and Sargon Avakad. Let's go. Okay, now I sort of understand why the likes of Elon Musk make the argument they do, but as with a lot of things, I think a lot of great philosophers and thinkers do not have spiritual wisdom, and a drop of spiritual wisdom is worth more than an ocean of intellect of the world. And whilst they are right that population does need to increase to prop up our system, what they don't really truly understand is we need to completely change the system that's corrupt rather than keep propping up the dodgy system, because we're essentially in a pyramid scheme. So people 50 years ago wanted their pensions, so then you need to have 2 kids to prop up and pay for the pension. And what's going on now is we're running out of population, so hence why they're importing so many immigrants to prop up the system, because we don't have the population. Parents these days aren't having 3, 4, 5 kids to keep the Ponzi going, so hence why they are importing so many immigrants into our countries. And whilst that makes sense from the system's point of view, ultimately the system is a giant Ponzi scheme that needs to collapse rather than us propping it up with essentially what people are advocating is you're going to have children to make them slaves for a corrupt system, which is absolutely ridiculous idea. And if you understand how our financial system essentially works, it's a giant Ponzi scheme and a scam. And what we need to do is implement a new financial system, such as if you looked into something like you could have central bank digital currencies done in a good way, backed by Bitcoin and gold. So then it would be a fair system, and you'd ban the government from printing more money because it would be backed by something like Bitcoin, which is limited in supply. And then we would have a fair system. And then you could ban usury. You could give out interest-free mortgage payments because the currency wouldn't be inflationary. And you could get rid of other corrupt institutions, such as all the institutions in our world that are supposed to exist to serve the people. They exist now to serve themselves and abuse the people. For example, you have the financial system exists to serve itself. You have the big pharmaceutical industry that exists not to make people healthy, but to serve itself and sell as many pills and make as much money. You have big governments now, just as where I'm from in the UK. The government doesn't exist to serve the people, it exists to serve itself and make as much money as it can. Hence why it is oppressing the people. And the people are the enemy of big government. So the government doesn't exist to serve the people, it exists to serve itself. You also have the military-industrial complex. It's supposed to be there to serve and protect the people, but it's there to make as much money as possible and brainwash people into fighting pointless wars. You also have like the police organization. The police are supposed to be there to serve the people, but now the people are there to serve the police, or the police are there to serve its own organizations of corruption, and it abuses the people, as again what's happening in the UK. We are being abused by the police. And again, you look at religion, the Vatican, the Church of England. They do not exist to spiritually serve the people. They are there to serve themselves and make as much money as they can. They are the 2 of the richest institutions in the world. I understand the Church of England is worth £14 billion, where you could imagine what a real man of God such as myself and many others could do with that money. We would completely revolutionize the country if we had that sort of backing behind us. But what happens is people get comfortable in there and they are protecting their power and money. Just as in the times of Jesus, Jesus went in and turned over the tables in the churches because they were serving themselves rather than the people. And that's what essentially people such as myself are wanting to do in modern times, go into the Church of England and toss over the tables because they do not serve the Father and the people, they serve the church and themselves. Now, the reason I've gone on that mini rant about these big organizations is because we need to first change these organizations. So if we can institute a fair financial system, a real spiritual movement, health industry that actually promotes real health, governments that serve the people rather than themselves, once we change that soulless system into a system guided by the Father and noble spiritual people, then we can bring children into the world that are going to be embraced by a beautiful system rather than a corrupt system. So what I would actually suggest is that most people should not focus on having children for a generation unless take down this corrupt system, put all our time, effort, energy, money into wiping out this corrupt system, and then rebuild, as I said, some of those ideas I mentioned. Let's rebuild a new system that's a beautiful system, and then the next generation have as many kids as you want. You know, I don't really care about population, whether it goes up or down. I care about whether children coming into this world are going to be embraced and born into a healthy, beautiful system, or be born into a system of slavery and corruption. That's all I care about. So I'd be happy if people stopped having kids for a generation, got a new beautiful system, and then you have 10 kids for all I'm concerned. I'm not concerned about cutting or evolving population. I'm concerned about whether the system they're born into is healthy and whether these souls are going to be honored with a beautiful life and existence rather than an existence of being a slave. And I also like to add, I'm not like encouraging people not to have children. I'm just saying that we need to honor children who come into the system and make sure they're born into a healthy system. And there's nothing more beautiful than a gift of a child. So, you know, I'm not like these leftists who hate children. They hate God, so they don't want any children to be born. That's a sick way of looking at things. What I'm saying is the opposite. I believe there's nothing more beautiful than a child being born into the world, but to me, there's nothing more sad than watching beautiful souls and children being born and then having to exist in a corrupt system. You know, when I look at some of my young family members and the young kids that my friends have and all young people in the world, my heart breaks for them because they're being born into a corrupt system. And you've got this proof amount of mental health that young people suffer from because they're in a corrupt, soulless system. And I want that to end. You know, whereas the likes of Elon Musk, Jordan Peterson and Carl Benjamin, Sargon of Akkad are saying is, no, we need to prop up the system. You need to keep having babies, keep having babies. But you're making babies born into a corrupt world. And this is not to be rude, but if you look at Elon Musk, he had 5 or 6 children. And unfortunately, he had a divorce early on in one of his marriages, and that messed up his children. And then he's recently had an argument with one of his kids who's transitioned. And at first, I sort of agreed with Elon because they were saying he lost his son to the woke mind virus, who's now thinks he's a daughter. Then I saw the riposte from his son/daughter, and I kind of had some empathy for his son/daughter, and I got what they were saying, and that Elon didn't really understand them. And I personally believe that the child suffered trauma because one of the worst things that can happen to a child is for their parents to divorce. And again, because parents are selfish in this world and are only thinking of themselves, not the soul of the child, they'll have a divorce to suit their own selfish needs and destroy their children's soul. And whilst physically beating a child is bad, what's just as bad, if not even worse, is to divorce and destroy your child's soul. But that, unfortunately, is the idea of the world is, no, we just need to pump out children, and I love my children because they're mine. But you love your children by honouring their soul and protecting their spirit, which would mean doing everything you humanly can do possible to stay married. I understand that sometimes it's not going to work out, and that's fair. But if you can do it in an honourable way, things can work out to protect the child. But when you get divorced and get married 6 months later, introduce stepchildren, and it causes all sorts of confusion and trauma to young children. Whether you know it or not, it's spiritual trauma, and it's actually evil. And in the same way, I would argue that bringing children into this world just for your own selfishness is also evil. And that's one thing I have learnt, or I came to realize when I truly spiritually awakened. There was a little bit of resentment towards, you know, parents and society who raised me in a sick system, and they didn't honor my soul. They recreated me in their image, and they selfishly wanted me to do as I was told. And when I woke up, you know, I was a people pleaser, and I went along with the system because I was brainwashed like everyone else. And do as your parents say, do as the teachers say, do as the priests say, even though I wasn't religious, but that's what people do. But when I woke up and I found the truth of the spirit, and I started living through my own spiritual path, they hated me. Oh, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? And I became the enemy. And that's when I understood what Jesus Christ meant. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. I came to pit a child against their mother and father. And that's what happened when I was reborn in the spirit, reborn in Christ. My parents and family and somewhat friends didn't like it because I was leaving the system. You know, parents didn't like it. Oh no, why are you not doing as we say? You know, friends didn't like it when I stopped drinking alcohol. And the system in general didn't like it when I stopped being a slave. And if you're a Christian and you leave Christianity to follow the truth of Christ and the truth of the Spirit and the Father, the church leaders, your church congregation and religious people will not like you. You'll become the enemy. Okay, so to conclude the video, the point I'm getting at is that we really need to focus on changing the system. Ultimately, the best course of action is for us to return to the spiritual Father and receive his wisdom and love, and then change the systems to contain and be led by people who have the Father's love. And then once we've built systems and governments and spiritual movements and financial institutions that represent God, then children can be brought into this world and it'll be beautiful and amazing. Whereas right now, as I say, my heart goes out to young people. The world is a mess. The education system's a mess. The financial system's a mess. The streets aren't safe, as you've seen in England. People getting stabbed left, right and centre. We had young girls, 11 or up to 20 got stabbed, 3 murdered. And this is all over the place. It's not safe. It's sick. They're going to be brainwashed by a corrupt system. So we need to change the system and bring God's wisdom and God's love into the world so that these children can come in and be embraced by a system of God's love rather than a system of corruption and darkness. Okay, so that's my side of the argument. Comment below if you agree or you disagree. I'm always willing to have open context. I'm not always right. I always learn as I go along. So let me know what you're thinking. If you like the video, like it, subscribe for more if you're new to the channel, and God bless everyone. Goodbye.